is to have my art supplies on the kitchen table instead of my clinical tools. This is going to be, here you are, this is how we're going to talk. We're going to talk through art, and you can create whatever you like. Here's your canvas, or here's your piece of paper, and here's mine. We're going to just do something together. It doesn't matter what you do, really. And that was how I was able to communicate with him. He started creating, I started creating something. There weren't any expectations of no performance, I wasn't going to fix him. I was just going to let him just get on with painting, and if he wanted to talk, he could talk, and if he didn't, that was fine. But we did start talking.
Today's guest is Bev Jessop, a former speech therapist turned creative mentor who walked away from a 30-year career to help women connect with themselves and with God through art journaling and creative reflection. She's the founder of the Creative Sanctuary, a faith-based membership that helps women slow down, rediscover purpose, and build a gentle, grace-filled spiritual practice through creativity. Welcome, Bev.
Hello. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Anita. Glad to be here.
Oh, this is fantastic. Wow, what a introduction. All for creativity. So let's dive in. So with that said, what is one of the most courageous things you have done?
I think the most courageous thing I've done today, other than jumping out of an aeroplane for charity, is to walk away from my 30-year career as a speech therapist, away from business as well.
So what led you to walk away from a 30-year career as a speech therapist? And firstly, can I just say, what took you into that?
Well, I started working as a speech therapist in 1990, after I graduated then. And I think at the time when you're sort of choosing options and things, I thought, well, I could be a teacher, I could be a doctor, but I don't think I'm going to get the grades to be a doctor. I come from an Asian background, so you have to do something sensible, and being an artist wasn't something that my parents would have regarded as sensible. So those are the options. And I thought, I don't really want to work with 30 kids. I don't think I could do that. And so I found something in between, which was being a speech therapist, and the power of giving someone a voice to communicate was really strong. And I thought, yes, that's what I want to do. So I started my career in 1990, and I worked in schools and hospitals and clinics and special schools and very residential sort of specialist schools and things like that. And, I never really thought that, I never imagined that I would actually walk away from that sort of career. I built myself a successful business. I saw clients all over the world. And so walking away was something really personal and really painful at the time. Because, for 30 years, I was passionate about helping people find their voice, especially those who had no means of communication. Okay. It wasn't just a job. It was like a calling. I wanted to give that person a voice. And I remember when I was expecting my first child, and it was in one of my first jobs, working with the NHS. As a young boy with cerebral palsy, and he had a voice box, I would call it, a communication box sort of strapped to his wheelchair. And it was a device, but I wanted him to live life. I wanted him to feel empowered, that he could do anything. And one of the tasks I set him to do was to go to Sainsbury's and order my lunch for me. Right? Not just his lunch, but, because I think he probably would have chosen something from McDonald's, but we were short on time, but I said, I want you to choose my lunch. And I had a bizarre, because I was pregnant, I had this really bizarre thing for Wensleydale cheese with apricot.
Cravings.
Yeah, really. Yeah, my cravings were like really bizarre. And things like, pork pie, little pork pies with cranberries on the top. So I got him to go and get those things for me. And I remember his eyes rolling, thinking, oh, do I really have to do this? But he did it. And he did it with confidence. He spoke up and was heard, pressed the right buttons. And he got those things, really specific things, because he had to get a quarter of a pound of Wensleydale with apricot. And that moment stayed with me, and in that school, I set up my first summer school for parents as well.
Wow.
Because I had parents who couldn't believe that their kids would do anything. Here they are in a wheelchair. How are they going to communicate? And I got other adults in wheelchairs who were like advocates and ambassadors for using communication aids. And I remember one guy, a parent asked him, are you, it's a personal question, are you in a relationship? I can't see my child ever having a relationship. And this was a young man who couldn't use his fingers to press the buttons on his communication aid. He would, his cerebral palsy affected his fingers as well. And all he had was a strap round an eye probe around his head, and he would use his head to point to the symbols on his communication aid.
Wow.
And he said to her, do you know, I am married. I'm married actually to a speech therapist. And he said, have you heard about pillow talk? And, I could see the mum kind of getting really embarrassed and red in the face. It's like, oh, this is a bit inappropriate. But what he was talking about was how his wife had embroidered symbols on the pillows. And so when he needed something like a drink to get his, I don't know, book or his aid or something, I don't know, she had embroidered everything he needed on the pillowcase. And all he needed to do is just look at those symbols. And that spoke to me as well, that communication can happen anywhere, and it's so important. And it gave those parents hope. And then later on in 2015, long before Zoom calls and, remote support became the norm, I was working with a young man in Italy. And he couldn't read, he couldn't write, he had no way to speak, he didn't have an iPad with a communication system on it, an app on it. And I persuaded his parents to get an iPad to put this particular app on, and he had to pass 5 oral exams. Now in Italy they don't have special schools, they have mainstream schools. And I had to get all these symbols created, color coded, and he had to pass exams on Ungaretti, who I think is an Italian philosopher, and Picasso, and Farewell to Arms. And he had to do all these sort of presentations. And I trained his parents, I trained his teachers, his care team, and he passed all 5 oral exams. And I thought, gosh, if I'm able to change lives across the world, that's amazing, But then everything shifted for me in the last 18 months. A close member of family attempted suicide 9 times in 18 months.
Wow.
And I became his constant carer. And my son was in the middle of his A-levels, and my husband was under a lot of stress at work, and I was holding everything together. Slowly I began to kind of lose myself, and I felt joyless, disconnected, spiritually dry. And I kept asking God, what what now? Because I had to kind of stop certain contracts because of what was happening with this loved one. And then in this quiet space, creativity came to me. And it wasn't loud, it wasn't kind of dramatic or anything like that. It was just a whisper. It was just, picked up my pens, picked up my brushes, and I started doing things. And in that stillness, I just learned something more about myself and about I gave myself space, I guess. I gave myself space to get reconnected with God and with myself. And I hadn't known about that for years, And then that's what started something new.
Wow. I mean, just listening to the stories, and to be honest, I don't realize, unless you actually speak to someone, what's involved with our everyday speech. We just naturally take it for granted, don't we? At least I do. And wow, and what a career. What a fabulous calling that was. I mean, I'm proud. You must be absolutely so proud of yourself for what you've achieved. It's absolutely fantastic. Just like all the different ways of communication. Wow, for someone that, takes it for granted, it's an eye opener. So thank you for sharing all that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just beautiful. And I can understand why it was a major shift to make that change, because you would want to help so much, and then you think, really, do you want to leave? Do you want to change? But circumstances do give us different directions, don't they?
They do, yeah. And we all take communication for granted, but there are different forms of communication. And I realized that I didn't have to just do that particular job. It did become a kind of job for me, because I was under so much stress from the personal stuff that I'd lost that joy. But yeah, communication is so important, isn't it?
Wow. And how did you find the courage to let go of your former identity and trust God with your new calling then? Because that's, like you said, the little voice came gently. And then how did you know to go with that?
Well, I wouldn't say initially that it was courageous. I didn't feel courageous. I was exhausted, to be
Yeah, I
honest,
bet.
And so much of my identity was built around being a speech therapist. It was who I was, it's how I introduced myself to people. And then that was taken away. I couldn't call myself a speech therapist anymore. I made that decision to deregister from the Royal College of Speech Language Therapists, and so I couldn't call myself that. And I was thinking, well, I needed to have a purpose. That was my purpose for 30 years, and now my purpose has changed. And it was through that unraveling, that person who was going through his mental health crisis, I realized that I couldn't communicate with him even, and he was close to me, and yet I found myself sort of thinking, well, the only way I can communicate with him is when he comes to the door, is to have my art supplies on the kitchen table instead of my clinical tools. This is going to be, here you are, this is how we're going to talk. We're going to talk through art, and you can create whatever you like. Here's your canvas, or here's your piece of paper, and here's mine. We're going to just do something together. Doesn't matter what you do, really. And that was how I was able to communicate with him. He started creating, I started creating something. There weren't any expectations of no performance, I wasn't going to fix him. I was just going to let him just get on with painting, and if he wanted to talk, he could talk, and if he didn't, that was fine. But we did start talking about some of the issues that he was having in his head and anxiety, and I just felt God say to me, this will work now. And so I didn't walk away from my identity, I suppose, in one go. I just had to surrender parts of it in pieces and just let God just take control of it, and just trust him that he hadn't kind of finished the work in me. He was just calling me into something different and something deeper.
Wow. And that's so beautiful. And, I think that's really beautiful and courageous of you to allow someone to just be, because every day, we're told do this, do that, they've got to find a solution. It's coming from that inner grounding that allows someone to just be. And I think you gave that safe space. It was a safe space just to be. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And what a way to communicate. It really is. And that's really heartfelt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially when, you come from this day and age of world where you've got to fix things, you've got to do that. No, we don't need to fix. Nobody's broken. Nobody needs fixing. And what you're doing is absolutely superb. Allow ourselves to just be, whatever it takes. And I'm sure I'm being dyslexic myself. I am predominantly right brain, so creativity is my thing. Linear, not so great.
yeah,
And so I can really relate to that. Pictures, everything, just create something. And there'll be more meaning in that picture for someone that can't express their words. And I guess that's where, your speech therapy comes in, because you've always found alternatives. So I can see how you've come into this creativity seriously. Even when you were telling me about the man that was married, his wife made the pillowcase with all the pictures on it. I mean, I think that's fantastic.
it is. I
You
don't
know,
think I could embroider that, but I'll probably end up drawing it on with fabric pins or something. But it's something, isn't it,
mm,
that
mm,
you want
mm,
your loved one to be
mm,
able to communicate wherever they are,
yeah.
even in bed. When they want a hug and whether they want a kiss, whatever it is, you need to have
Mm,
some way of asking for that
mm,
comfort.
mm,
So yeah, it's important to do that.
absolutely. So why do so many women struggle to make time for themselves, and how can creativity help? I mean, in a world where we're so fast paced now, we want to do things yesterday. What's the next thing? And I totally understand that. What are the struggles?
Well, as women, I think we're always giving. We're
Mm,
always kind of spreading ourselves so thinly that we're giving to this person, we're giving to that person, we're giving all the time and forgetting about ourselves. And you have that whole that adage of, put your oxygen mask on before you can help others. But actually, we just run ourselves dry. We
mm,
become empty vessels. And women are carers. They're planners. They're emotional anchors. They're always holding space for everyone else. And in the process, we end up sort of disappearing or losing ourselves, and then we feel guilty that we're taking time for ourselves, and we push ourselves right down to the bottom of the list.
mm,
um, and I'm guilty of that too. But I remember yesterday I woke up and I thought, no, I'm going to create some art,
mm,
and I was painting a picture of um, a jug and a heart, and the out of the jug was coming out gold, and the heart was all broken and cracked. It was intact sort of, but there were cracks in it, and inside the cracks went the gold. And I thought of the Kintsugi kind of art of
yeah.
pottery. How out of our brokenness, God can kind of fill us with that gold, and
Mm,
and and we can become more beautiful than what it was before. And so I decided that I wanted to spend that time of creating, and I put some collage and fabrics and things like that on the painting. And then from that, I then created a podcast, which is on my YouTube. But we sometimes feel guilty about that. I mean, I felt guilty doing that because I was thinking, oh, I've got to do my dishwasher, I've got to hang out the clothes, I've got to do this, all the other chores that we have to do, before we can even give ourselves time for ourselves. And that's where creativity comes in. It's not just another thing on the to-do list.
yeah,
It's like a
absolutely.
gift. It's a gift to ourselves. And that's when I began art journaling. I actually was about 43 when I started it. But it wasn't about making something beautiful. It was about just finding peace in that chaos of life, in that mess. And then it's about just showing up for yourself, really, when everything feels a bit too much. And, you know, creativity helped me process pain, and process grief. And, when I lost my dad last year, it helped me process that. Just to be able to sit with God, to listen more deeply, to kind of do that soul work and just bring it back to myself, really. And that's what, I really want women to be able to do, just come back to themselves and get close to God.
And I think that's really beautiful, because you just generally, women, we are, giving so much, the mother figure, doing so much for everyone else. And even with your friends, even if you haven't, got children, so not just mother figures, I think generally it's our role to give, but sometimes you've got to have for yourself as well. Truly understand that. So you are the founder of the Creative Sanctuary. Tell me, what is that and who's it for?
Well, it's a faith-friendly membership. It's for women who are spiritually weary, who are far away from God or creatively blocked. They feel overwhelmed with life, and they want to use creativity, art, journaling, to get closer to God and to get closer to themselves, to find that peace, to find that purpose in life. And it's for those who want to show up for themselves. They're constantly showing up for others, but they've kind of forgotten themselves. So inside we journal, we rest, we have monthly mixed media workshops, we have journals with reflective prompts, scripture-based meditations, audio meditations. We have printable resources, and it's a community of women who are walking the same path, that gentle path towards healing and towards being wholeness. You don't need to have art skills. It's not about that. Although, you will create some beautiful art pieces that you want to hang up on the wall as reminders, and maybe put some quotes on it, whatever. But it's about making space, really. It's about making space, meeting with God, remembering who we are, we're letting go of that pressure to perform. So for those women who say, "Oh, I'm not creative, I can't even draw a stick man," it's not. It's for those people as well. It's for women who are trying to hold on to too many things, and just to kind of let go and let God restore them from the inside.
That's beautiful. That's really great. I think it's really wonderful what you're doing.
Thank
So
you.
tell me a bit about your podcast and what's that about?
Creativity Released. You'll find that on YouTube, and that's about really for those women who feel that they're not creative enough, who are not artistic. It's about getting closer to God through using your art, using your creativity, about being in His presence, and not about producing, but giving yourself permission to play, to explore, to listen to Him. God doesn't ask for perfection; He just asks for us to be present and have that relationship with Him. So it's about feeling emotionally dry, maybe emotionally stuck, and how to use art journaling and art, a scribble as a prayer, or just a torn up piece of paper that you might have written something, written a prayer, written your feelings down on, and stick it in that art journal, but with a bit of a splash of color, just to give you that hope. Yeah, it's about being creative and being in His presence, where God will meet you.
I think that's so beautiful, because here's the thing, right? Yeah, we all think we're not creative, but actually once you start, you're surprised what comes out if you just let it flow out, just, the little lines and whatever you're doing. It's fantastic. So anybody that thinks they're not creative, everybody is, because your piece of creative art means something to you. It might not be, Picasso or whatever, but it doesn't have to be. It's for you,
Exactly.
whatever you want to do and what it means to you. And I think people compare a lot as well, and it's not about that. You do what you want, and that's what it's all about. It's coming from inside you, whatever your creativity, whatever you want to express. So I love that. Really love that.
Thank you.
So, oh, my pleasure. What's one of the most important lessons you've learnt over your life so far? Because you've done a lot of things.
Well, I've been inspired by your story, Anita, and thinking about courage. Courage is about being quietly obedient. It's not about those big stage moments. It's not about being fearless, but it's about saying yes even when you don't know what the next step is. It's about showing up on the kitchen table with your art supplies even when you feel tired of talking to that person, because you know they're going to have those same feelings and you're going around the boy over and over again. It's about choosing to rest when the world is saying, come on, go, 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 let's hustle, let's get things done. And it's about whispering, a prayer, even with those, put paint on your fingers and just making a mess on your page, and that's your prayer. And courage is just choosing that presence, choosing presence and being with God over the performance. Because when I left my career, I didn't really feel brave. It felt like heartbreak, really, because after 30 years.
I bet.
But I learned to surrender those titles and my expectations and even my timelines to God, and just found to be deeper, something deeper. Then creativity, I found peace, and if you take that courage, you can find peace too. Just keep creating and keep inviting that right side of the brain, that creative side, and the one who created you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's beautiful. And thank you for your kind words about my story. So, what would you say to anyone that's listening who feels stuck or spiritually dry but doesn't think they're creative enough to start?
Yeah, I'll just say that you are made in the image of God, and God is our creator, and therefore, you are creative. And even if it is just a scribble on a piece of paper and you use different colors to do that scribble, that is creative. And, through those scribbles, you might think of certain words that pop up in your head and think, I might write these words like joy and hope and peace, or whatever words, that resilience, that might come into your head, and you could write those down, and you might write them in different ways, block capitals or script or just scribbly text or whatever it is. That is creative, and you just need to go and just let go and just do it.
Absolutely. Can't agree more with that, to be honest. That is great. So, where can the listeners find you online, your podcast? What's your website, Bev?
Well, if they go to christianartjournaling.com /workshop, I've actually got a new workshop coming up on the 24th of May, and we're going to create our first art journal page, to the first page, to get over those creative blocks. And people can sign up there. It's a faith-friendly creative workshop, and it's going to be a peaceful session where women can create their first art journal page. No pressure to be perfect, just creativity, calm, and connecting with God. And I can't wait for people to come along and sign up. I've got a podcast as well, which is called Creativity Release, which you'll find on YouTube. And they can find that at christianartjournaling.com /podcast. I'd just like to say that I've really enjoyed talking to you, Anita.
Oh, thank you. Because what I'll do is all the links will be in the show notes. So please do go ahead and connect with Bev, and absolutely be wonderful for you and get that creativity muscles going.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. So thank you for sharing your insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, you have helped so many others and made a difference. I'd really like to acknowledge you for that, Bev Jessop.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So we are all about Create the Courage to Be Fearless podcast here. What is your definition of courage?
Courage, as I had said before, was just being quietly obedient. It's not about those big moments where you stand on a stage and it's not about being fearless. It's about just saying yes, even when you don't know what the next step is. Even when you're tired, just saying yes. And, choosing to be present over performance.